Hi, everybody. I'm Jose Cuenca, and I'm going to give you a presentation of Notrick, a tool designed for tennis and paddle tennis schools and academies. As you can see, we have a series of shortcuts that we can use to quickly access each of the sections of the tool. We'll be giving you a tour of the tool using the functionalities we can see on the left side of the screen, and I'll explain what each of them does so you can get to know the product in more detail. In my academies, we set up winter and summer schools, as well as any camp that we want to create with a slightly different schedule. We can name them in different ways by clicking Add Academy. We can create as many academies as we want. Once my academies has been created, I can set up the schedule. Okay, so here you can see the full week schedule with all our courts and all the groups we've assigned to each configured session. From my academies, we can also activate and pause player and coach evaluations as we create them. We'll decide how often we want to evaluate them and what parameters to evaluate. And if there's a holiday or long weekend when we want to pause the evaluation so they don't pop up in the app and let the coaches rest, well, it's an option we can use. After setting up my academies, let's move on to the technical team where we'll register the coaches who will work at our school and be able to use the app. From here, coaches will be able to view anything that the director or the person managing this control panel wants them to see. They'll see the player's methodology, they'll see the performance plans, they'll mark attendance and little else. Then they'll be able to see all the notices added to the tool, such as events, news, and announcements, which we will see later. Adding a coach is as easy as clicking on the Add button, filling in a few fields, and that coach, director, or coordinator will be able to have their application. The image you see can be uploaded from the application, or we can directly upload it from the control panel. Then we move on to the parameters. We've set parameters for everything, in this case tennis. I always remember we're talking about tennis in this presentation, but the tool is exactly the same for paddle. So whatever data we can always bring to paddle because it's identical, just that all the parameters change, which are obviously different because they are two different sports. Here we have a button where we can see all the parameters we have. We have almost 800 parameters. We can also visualize them by filtering a bit based on our curiosity. Imagine I click on technique, I click on initiation, and I see the quarterly goals that we have thought for initiation. Here I see it goes from almost 800 parameters to about 20. That's what makes it easier for me to plan later. When I'm going to make a plan for a beginner level and I want to set quarterly goals, for example, it'll show me only the ones that are designed for that level. What can I do with those parameters? With the Notrick parameters, I can just visualize them, and there they are. I'll always be able to get rid of them, but I'll also be able to duplicate them and nurture them in some way. If I'm going to duplicate it, for instance, I'll be able to edit this entire parameter, change the filters, even add more or less information. I'll be able to put a link to it, which is related to the parameter with a video, with a Google Drive, or anything I want to share in that parameter. You can insert an attachment, an image, etc. Parameters can also be created from scratch. If I add to it, we always have a vertical in Notrick where we provide the structure totally empty so that you can use that structure to create your own methodology and gradually contribute more parameters to the system. I always say this is totally optional because when we're going to plan, we can always use the Notrick parameters. When we copy a Notrick parameter, that parameter becomes its own parameter. If you notice, I'm going to copy the parameter, I'm going to save it, and in my own parameters, I already have my first parameter, right? So it's very easy to create our own methodology. If I mark one of these parameters as a shared parameter, it means that I'm sharing that parameter in a community where people or directors can share it. Here there can be a series of parameters that directors and coaches, if they've been creating a methodology, some parameter, some plan can share. It's totally optional, and other clubs or directors will be able to benefit from the knowledge of their peers. And conversely, if a coach wants to share or duplicate something from another coach, there is always the possibility through this channel. Once we've observed the parameters, we can start planning. Notrick's plan provides a set of parameters and also provides training plans. We cater to all levels, from mini tennis to competition, and we have different training plans at each level, from 2 weeks, 4 weeks to an annual plan. If, for example, we get into an enhancement level, which could perfectly be the case, and we duplicate a plan to do the same, here the plan's title might already change, which I might call Notrick plan, for instance, and I could add all the parameters I wanted depending on what we have created for the clubs that we can use. These are parameters that would be seen later in the application. This plan can be viewed in the app by both players and coaches. From here, we can start planning or change things that interest us. If I go, for example, to a quarterly plan within this same plan, I can play around with the parameters and see which parameters I like, which parameters I want to eliminate, if I want to change the location of that parameter, or if I want to add new parameters. I would have no problem in selecting and adding. The dots you're seeing on my right or the right of the screen are dots to highlight a parameter in that period. How much focus we're going to give to that parameter in that quarter, or that month, even that week. You can play around with these dots for planning, which makes it easier. We can provide plans of up to 10 months, 12 months, 9 months, that you can see how everyone has access to that content. We can do weekly and daily schedules, that's no problem. And we could always put the date we want for that day's plan to plan ahead and make changes. Here, as you can see, I can add some example parameters and I'd already be planning that day. I could always take those parameters from all the parameters from the public ones or from my own. So if we've previously created our own parameters to plan, then the system will offer me the parameters here. In this case, since we don't have any, it doesn't offer them to me. Once we have that plan, we already have a plan of our own that we would create, save, and our own plans would be dumped. If we go directly to our own training plans, here are a few as an example. These would be the plans that each club would work with. Each club would have its own plans, and they would be the ones that it would give to each group in its school. Once you apply a plan you've already made to your groups, the whole group, along with the coach, players, and others, will be able to see that plan. Here we also have the totally empty structure, where we can create a plan from scratch with the period they want. If I put test here, for example, I could put the level. The system will filter all the parameters designed for that level. We have two fields here that we could use to put the message for the coach or for the player and the period with which we want to plan. If we want to plan weekly, we can just do it within the week. Which week do I want to start? I want to start on February 5th. And here I would continue adding parameters in the way I showed you earlier. Well, I think this part of training plans is clear. Similarly, the evaluation plans. We provide a series of evaluation plans that we can duplicate to change parameters that we consider, including the title. We can name it a performance plan. The level is already set, and here we have a daily, monthly, quarterly, and final frequency. If we go daily, for example, we have some mental behavior parameters that we can share with our coach for evaluation. And then we'd also have monthly technical, tactical, physical, and mental parameters. So those are the parameters our coaches evaluate our players on. We have the option of doing an automatic quarterly evaluation, where it takes all the algorithms from the previous months and so on. Should you ever decide to work with Notrick, we have tutorials. Indeed, you can even explain how to explore each of these features more deeply. Assessment plans can also be created from scratch. We can give it a name, for example, test the level of refinement, and we can add the frequency that we want. If we want to add a monthly frequency to evaluate every month, we can set a reminder in the app for our coaches to evaluate the parameters that we've decided on every month. As you can see, they're marked here. Once I tell you to create a draft and publish, they would have all these parameters available in the app. Once we've reviewed the training and evaluation plans, we continue with the labels. Labels are a very useful and very straightforward functionality. It's simply to differentiate the types of students we're going to have in school. For instance, if they are gamers who compete, whether they are players coming just from Christmas camp or summer camp, if they play on teams, tags are added to the system, and then those tags can be assigned to the players. This way, the platform makes it easier for us when we want to form groups or send messages to small teams. not the entire student body. That will enable us to filter by tags and send information to those we are actually interested in. Under players, we have our database where we can register them en masse with a template we provide, making it simpler for the clubs. We can also add players individually by inputting some basic information. The players are registered and then appear in this list with a draft status. What does draft status mean? It means that we've added, in this case, we don't have any draft players, but we've added our whole database and we've not activated anyone. If we don't activate anyone, no one can download the app. If at some point I want to activate all the players so they can start viewing this app, which is what it's all about, I would simply mark those players who want and hit the activate button. At that moment, they'd receive a WhatsApp message and an email with a username and password. They download the application and they would start to see all the content that the director has contributed for it. We're interested in having all the players in draft status beforehand so that we can calmly do all the groups, assign training plans, evaluation plans, so that everything is properly configured. Once everything is completely under control, we say, okay, now let's activate the players. And at that moment, everyone can already view their teammates, while the entire attendance list, their plans for the entire year or for that period, they can see their plans, their performance charts, absolutely everything. From this list, we can visualize the level of each student, which can be changed in one very simple way, okay, one by one or in a massive way. Selecting different, we can change the level of everyone at once. Tags can be assigned. From here we see which students have their group assigned. Well, a lot of information that obviously if you decide to work with Notrick, you will know in depth. From here we can see the attendance control of all our students. For example, on the 17th, these 3 students were absent. If every day our coaches do their job and take attendance, then you can fully see all the absences that have occurred every day. In groups, we shape our academy from here. And when we create a group, we select a fully editable name, our group's name. We select a coach who will be the tutor of that group. We filter the level by the academy. At this moment, the system shows me everything related to the mini tennis level. Lesson plans, students, all of that is filtered for me so that if I have a school with large volume, for example, 800 students, the system only shows me the plans that are designed for mini tennis and the players designated for it. As you can see, I input the age range, the hourly offer that the system I previously created in my academies gives me, the training plan that we have for under 6, the evaluation plan with the frequencies we want our coaches to assess, the maximum number of players we want in our group. In this case, we would put 8, and here we would have the whole group worked out. We can have an assistant coach, we can add a physical trainer, and we would add the players from here. Simply by clicking and adding the players we want, in this case, they're all added. We could access all the students we wanted to add them to the group. And just a little bit more from here, we would update the group and we would already have an updated group. If we want to create it from scratch, we basically fill in this data and generate a group as simple as you've seen above. From here, we can see all the information each group has in a simple and intuitive way, so that we don't have to access each group to see all the information. Personalized training sessions are designed so that the player who competes, or who apart from coming to school also has some reinforcement classes, or simply that player who only gives private lessons, well, it's a way to take your personalized training in a different manner. It's not linked to the academy structure, and the schedule is entirely flexible. So I could go changing this schedule, for example, Monday and Wednesday, and it'd be as easy as changing the schedule from there in a simple way, writing a text, but it wouldn't break the direct link I have with my academies, which is a more permanent structure so that the entire school is more organized during all the seasons. From here, we have the reports where we can provide recommendations from the club itself so that all our users can see them. We're talking about knowledge that can come in very handy for all the end users, such as regarding the recommended subject matter, the athlete's guide, and things you're seeing on the screen. All of that is then seen in a very visual way from the app. If we go into each of them, it has its content, and we have used that content in this case as an example so that you can get an idea of what can be done here. but obviously each club can contribute what it considers. And then we have the personalized reports, which are definitely designed more at a professional level or at a more specific or private level, where you can provide an evaluation plan. You can provide a personalized report directly to that player or that group, a nutrition plan, an injury, a treatment, a diagnosis. Here you are seeing that it is something that is seen in the management panel in a less visual way. In the application, it does have its image and it is quite attractive. And there is a history for the player of all those injuries or plans that have been provided to him. You can even provide him with a report about a match. Anything you want to share with that player is no problem. And then we have the communications part. From here, we can send anything that happens each day at the academy, like canceled classes due to rain, like any anomaly this afternoon. Anything you want to communicate in a fast and instant way is very agile and very simple. And it has one good thing, and that is we can send this announcement, which can be, for example, classes canceled due to rain from 7 in the evening. I put send to groups and choose the groups that are affected, in this case, by the rain. From here, I can see their schedule and I can start selecting the group I'm interested in. Just like a coaches meeting, I can mark it and select only the coaches I want to sit down with to run that meeting. Once you send it, a notification will arrive to them. The phone with one, like when any other notification from another application arrives, where they can access the application and see what it's about. In the same way, we can send communications. We can receive them from our players app or our greeting. Then we have the events. From here, we can generate any event we want in a super simple way by entering a name, some link if we wish, the start date, end date, some text, and then some image or anything that you consider. In this way, it also updates constantly and simultaneously in the application. Then we would have the news, which would be something similar. The difference is that this channel is usually used to comment on something that has perhaps already happened. In the event, we advertise what is going to happen and what type of event we want to offer. It can be a journey. It can be an internal tournament, an external tournament. And here in the news, we can publish how that tournament went, how that event went, or some outstanding result from one of our players, the opening of a new gymnasium, anything, a track closed for renovations, whatever you consider. But in the end, these are communication lanes that keep the end user connected to the club with the user, and the user with the club. And also that user has all the information about their sport in the palm of their hand. They have it all in one app. Attendance, calendar, it has the events, the plans, it has absolutely everything. Finally, we have the administrators. Here we can add any person we deem necessary to help us put the work in the system that is in the management panel. Because at the end of the day, what it's all about here is that the coach, the one who's on the court, just work with the app as its only task will be to take attendance, assess performance in a very simple way that you'll see immediately, and follow the methodology that we have set for it. But if we want one of our teams to help us enrich this panel, then from here we would enter the name and their email and assign them the roles that we think would be suitable for our support. And finally, we can simply change the password in settings. When you choose to work with the tool, I have a username and password. Passwords are usually quite complicated. And here we can change that password to make it easier to remember. Well, that concludes the presentation of Notrick in the management panel. But now let's proceed for a few minutes to the presentation of the app. Okay? Now you'll be able to visualize everything that's been done in this panel, how it's been executed in a realistic way in the app. Now I'm going to share the application with you all. This is the coach version. As you can see up top to the right, we've got a little bell with a red button where we can see all of the notifications that come to our application. We can see some of our groups on the home screen, but if we hit see all, we'd see all of the groups sorted from Monday to Friday with all of our schedule organized. Are we good? If we go, for example, here we could see Andrea's schedule, her attendance calendar. We can see the training plan. In this case, it would be a weekly training plan where we've got all these added parameters monthly, where we can go month by month, those parameters we added so that player and coach can have a structured methodological follow-up. and keep everything in order. These plans, as you know, can be used quarterly, annually, daily, however you want. Can we go into the group, okay? In this scenario, we're going to move in a somewhat larger group. We can observe all our team members and how we would assist them. Simply by marking the small icon as gray, it would turn red, and that's, well, the penalty that that player has. From here, we can evaluate, which might not be too straightforward, marking in this instance the mental performance. And we're shifting to monthly, and we would have the same scenario. Once we wrap up evaluating the parameters we have opted for, all right, we're going to share them. And in that moment, okay, a notification would appear on the mobile phone with that evaluation. From here, the trainer can also view the personalized workouts available to him, those that have been assigned to him. You can see all the reports that the club provides. As we mentioned earlier, their own recommendations, such as recommended equipment, diet routine. In this case, we're going to sign up here, how to stay hydrated. Well, a series of information that can be added to the system so that users have content. You can also access personalized reports of the players we have. In this case, as an example, he has a lot of injuries, but well, simply access that injury where the specialist can enter the diagnosis, treatment, and the process of how to treat that injury to the player. The player would keep that history, and the trainer, in this case, can view everything related to his player. In the midst of the news, as we've seen earlier in the management panel, and the press releases, well, events and news, sorry, where there could be both events and news. And then the press releases could be communicated between teammates, never with the players. You could communicate by selecting here which colleague you want to send a file to, a title, a description, anything you consider. Then we have an SOS button, which is to send my geolocation to our director, because in theory, there's been an incident or something that my director needs to know about. And instead of messing around with other types of apps, just by pressing that button, the director gets a warning that tells him something's happened and to come to the track. For example, if we tap here, which triggered the SOS, we open it and the geolocation shows where I am at the moment. This is the coaching section. From here, it can also be changed. We can access our profile, and here we can alter our information, change the images, add the details of our racket. In this case, this then is useful for the stringer we have at the school, so he can know all the details of our racket, and it makes his job easier. And from here, we can switch accounts. What is the purpose of switching accounts? In this case, you're seeing many accounts because I use this tool for demonstrating the product. But in this case, a coach who has 1, 2, or 3 children in the school will be able to have all their accounts here. Or a parent with a different child at school will be able to see all their accounts, and each one has content which simplifies day-to-day life, so they don't have to log in with different passwords going in and out of the tool. In this case, we're going to assume that we're going to log into my daughter's account. We're looking at Andrea's account in this case, and here Andrea can see exactly the same that we saw in the coach's app, including events, news, announcements, and her own groups. Obviously, a student doesn't see all the groups in the school. She only sees the group she is part of and her classmates. She can also see her schedule, her training plan, her attendance calendar, along with her own absences. She can see everything concerning her day-to-day life. If we go into the training plan, she can see her goal, etc. And then something really different from the coach's version. Forgive me for looking down every now and then, but I'm using my phone in real time. Performance. This is where the player can see something different. Here she can see all her graphs with the average of each parameter she is evaluated on, and she can browse through all the evaluations she receives over the course of her day-to-day life at school. We're not going to term it, for example, because the graphs and colors are changing. But to give you an idea, at the end, both the player and the parents are constantly informed at all times about what their child is working on every day at school. Likewise, they're constantly notified about everything that's happening, their progression. Ultimately, we're professionalizing this part of the academies that we believe is necessary. That are necessary? Once the presentation is over, both of the management panel and the application, I invite anyone who is interested in purchasing Notrick. Simply go to our website, notrickplanner.com, and subscribe. From that moment on, we will get in touch with you and launch the product. Nothing, thank you, and see you soon.